Welcome to the First Draft Club, a podcast to help you write your book with joy, clarity, and maybe a few coffee stains. I'm Mary Adkins. Dear Mary, what is the best way to think about and craft the inciting incident that will propel the entire story? I know it doesn't necessarily need to happen in the beginning of the novel, but how should we think about it in relation to the climax/collision scene? All right, if you are listening to this podcast, I am guessing you've heard the term inciting incident before. But in case you haven't, the definition is that it is an event that sets the story into motion. Okay, so it could be that the couple meets in a rom-com. It could be the body is found in a thriller or a mystery. In The Wizard of Oz, it's that the tornado shows up in Kansas and takes Dorothy away. In The Lion King, it's that Mufasa gets killed. In every Disney movie, it's that the parents die, I'm pretty sure. The term inciting incident, I actually don't use that term in any of my course materials on purpose because it has always given me anxiety. It pretty much makes me break out in hives. It has always felt like so much pressure. And so I really appreciated this question because it forced me to think about why that is. Why have I never really liked the term inciting incident? And to be honest, I spent days thinking about this before I was able to, I think, put a pin in what it is that bothers me so much about this term. And here's what I think it is. I think it's that when we say inciting incident, we are conflating two things. We are conflating where the story starts. Okay, so I literally mean what is the opening scene? What happens? Where is it? Who's there? What's happening at the beginning of the story? That's one piece. And the other piece is what is driving the main character? Why is the protagonist the protagonist? What is it they have to gain from the story? What is it they care about? What is it their unsatisfied want? What is motivating them? These are two different questions. And so while often they end up having the same answer, or at least an answer that serves to answer both, and so it feels really elegant. Mufasa dying both sets the story in motion. It gives Simba a reason to eventually seek the throne, his righteous entitlement to the throne, if I'm remembering Lion King correctly, and it's possible I'm not. But whatever it is he wants, that motivates him, and also happens to be what happens at the beginning of the movie. But that doesn't mean in thinking about those two things, we have to think about them together, because I think that's too hard. I find that too difficult for me to ask myself where does the story start and what is driving the main character. That feels like trying to sell my house and my car to the same person. I don't even know how to start thinking about that. So I would take those questions independently. I think they're more approachable when they're taken independently. Where does your story start? For the first question, well, I think stories can start a lot of places, so you don't need to find the exact right one. Just like the letter writer noted, the inciting incident doesn't have to be the opening scene of the novel or of the memoir, whatever story you're writing. I don't think there is an exact right place to start. I think the most important thing is that you have a reason for starting where you do. It's interesting. It reveals something about your characters and it hooks the reader. I mean, there are a bunch of reasons to start a novel or a book. And truthfully, you're probably going to revise your beginning later anyway. The chances of your beginning changing are 90-something%. And so don't sweat it. More often than I would have expected, I have worked with writers who say, well, I'm really stuck at the beginning because I'm really, really trying not to have to rewrite it. And I always say, why? Like, that's not going to prevent you from having to rewrite it. I mean, you're almost definitely going to rewrite the beginning because once you write the end, the beginning often needs to change. So writing a perfect beginning before you write the end isn't even a doable thing. You may have a gorgeous, beautiful beginning, but it may just not suit the novel in the end. So just don't overthink it. Don't spend all your time there. Get something down on paper and move along. By doing so, you're not saying that you don't recognize the importance of a book's beginning. You get it. And you know you're going to come back and fix it as needed. But you also know you need to start somewhere. It's likely to change later. And so you're just trying to get it done. Now, the other question that I think is packed into the term inciting incident is what is driving your protagonist or your main character? This is a psychological question, right? Why does the character behave this way? And this is much tougher. for some. For me, this is often a tougher question. Why is my character acting the way they do? What is driving this character? Whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, this is where you're going to get into backstory. I teach and what I do, which is that I like to discover backstory as I go through the writing. I like to discover it narratively rather than make a list of backstories generated in a vacuum in some kind of character profile exercise. I know others teach that, but for me, that feels contrived. I guess it kind of is. And it's also less fun. So because I discover character backstory narratively through writing, what that means is the early chapters of my books, often in early drafts, often have a ton of backstory. So I'm really diving into what it was like growing up in their families and what scars they have and what wounds they have and how this affects their behavior. And what that means is just that when I revise, I have a lot of backstory that I either need to cut because we don't want to just explain at the beginning, or just weave into later chapters more elegantly than just dump at the beginning of the book. So when you're thinking about the term inciting incident, I think what it really is getting at are two different questions. One, where does the story start? Where do you want to start it, I should say? Not where does it start as if it's this elusive thing that you have to discover as the writer and there's a right place to start and there's a wrong place to start. No, where do you want to start telling the story? And there are a bunch of different places it could be. Just pick one. As long as you have a reason for it, it's as good as any other. The other question is, what is driving your protagonist or your main character? What is compelling them to act? What is their deep-seated belief that's driving them? And for me, that is something that I discover through writing. I will decide in advance what a character's kind of unsatisfied want is at the beginning of writing because I need to know that in order to write towards something. But I don't have an elaborate psychological backstory to back up that want until I really start doing some drafting, doing some brainstorming through narrative rather than kind of making lists. And that's how I would think about the inciting incident so that you never have to use that term again. Thanks for listening to the First Draft Club. Subscribe and leave a review, and I will adore you forever. Happy writing. See you next week.